Hello, my name's Tonya Scott. I'm a secondary instructional coach and math specialist for Burke County Public Schools. I love teaching art and math integrated lessons because I believe that any opportunity to make connections for students helps them to make better meaning of the material that's being covered. I also really like the fact that students that are not always successful in math can find success in lessons like this. I'm going to show you a lesson based on Frank Stella's Rocka 2 series. Students will use this work as an inspiration to create concentric circles using a compass, and then they will color every other color using a crayon, use some watercolor resist, and finally cut their circles into different parts to create their own version of the Rocka 2 series. So along the way they'll also complete a math activity where they are looking at different parts of the circle, radius, diameter, area, circumference, and also discovering pi. This lesson will focus on the art concepts of shape, parts to whole, color, pattern, and repetition. Most of the time you're going to want to teach this lesson in the third 9 weeks. If you follow the North Carolina check-ins schedule, that's when it falls for the curriculum. Also, that's a great time because that's near Pi Day, March 14th, and since these are circles, that works really well with that. So let's get started with the lesson. Some materials you will need are some heavy watercolor paper. You want it to be pretty thick. You'll need these old school compasses, some crayons, scissors, watercolors, glue, and water. Now, if you are teaching, and paper towels. If you are teaching in a classroom that does not have a sink, you will want to have a gallon jug of clean water for your students, as well as a bucket to dump dirty water in. To start the lesson, you would give the students one sheet of the watercolor paper, and if you don't already have it cut into squares, which it's not necessary to do, you can just have them fold it in half like this. Give it a crease, and then just cut down the center, making 2 smaller rectangles. And then the easiest way to make these into squares is just to fold one, put one horizontal and one vertical, and then trim the edges. So each student will need at least 3 of these, so I would have them go ahead and probably make 4 just in case. So they would repeat that process again. So once you have those, the next step you're going to want to have students do is write their name on the back of every one of their squares, because inevitably about the time you finish the watercolor and it's not dry, it'll be time to place these on the back counter till tomorrow, and they will not have their name on them, and then it'll be a mess. So make sure students write their name on the back. And now for the fun part. You're gonna have students select a given radius. They can choose, or you can assign it, but I would usually let them choose. And I would pick the centimeter side and have students just select whatever measurement they want to start with, and then kind of eyeball the center and press down pretty hard, because that center point is going to be what you come back to each time. So I just spin the paper because that seems to be the easiest for me, and I think it's the easiest for students. So they have their first circle. They're going to do that on the first circle measurement on each of their 3 or 4 sheets of paper, however many you tell them to do it, before they change that radius again. So they're going to go ahead and repeat that. I'm just going to do it 3 times. Then they're going to select their next radius. Again, they're going to do that 3 times. And then you can have them. I usually try to make at least 4 circles. You can do more or less. It's completely up to the student or you. I got a little off circle that time. It's okay. And then I'll do one more. Go back to, and if they lose their diameter, their radius, they can just use their previous circles to measure. Go ahead and do this one since that last one got a little bumpy. So then students will have that. So you have a circle. So the next step is to color your circle. However, whichever pattern you choose, I'm gonna choose to color the smaller, I'm gonna leave the inside circle blank and then color the next circle. You may allow them to have as many colors as they want or have them choose 2 colors and stick with it. I prefer that typically just because it reduces trips to the bucket and decisions. That's hard for 7th graders sometimes. So for this, I'm gonna color the center. This is a great time to use up all your little bits and pieces of crayons because they're not going to be very good when you're finished with this. So then they're going to leave one circle plain without coloring, and then they're going to color the next circle. Again, they can choose which pattern they want to do this in, if they want to do it in different colors or the same color, or if all their circles want to be the same, or if they want to change them up. That's where they get to be creative. The art teacher can talk to them about complementary colors or supplementary colors, or you can make that part of the requirement if you wanted to. It's pretty open at this point once they get the circles drawn and have their measurements recorded on the other sheet for later math work. So once you're finished with your coloring, you're going to move on to your watercolors. And you're just going to have students paint over the entire square with one color of watercolor. See, the watercolor doesn't really stick to the crayon wax, so it makes a cool effect of the resist. And then we'll pretend that one's dry. Once those dry, you're going to let students cut these into either quarters or halves. I tend to always cut on like into triangular shapes. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that way. Students can certainly cut and just make smaller squares, but I always tend to cut the triangles. So once they do that, they'll arrange it however they choose and eventually end up with something maybe like this, and then they'll rearrange them into a piece, something like this, or whatever they want it to look like. Again, you could show lots of different examples from the Rocca series to give them some ideas, the protractor series, and let their imaginations run wild. You could also allow them to pair up or even make a classroom sized one where everyone's contributing parts and pieces. That part's totally up to you. But that concludes the art portion of the lesson. Now the students would go back and complete the sheet with the math portion, more of the definitions, and then formula for area of the circle, circumference, looking at the relationship between the circumference and diameter,